Hello and welcome to the podcast on lead-acid batteries by Ramesh Natarajan. With industry experience of over 42 years, Ramesh helps battery and battery-related industries with technical inputs and provides solutions to typical problems faced by manufacturers, service personnel, as well as users of batteries and related equipments. Do visit www.rameshnatarajan.in to stay connected. Enjoy the session.
Hello and welcome to today's podcast episode. Today I'm going to talk about a topic that is a bit non-technical in nature but concerning the battery manufacturing industry. The subject of my podcast today is 11 guidelines for achieving success in the battery manufacturing sector. I shall go over the guidelines one by one, and let me start with the first guideline, which is to comprehend the fundamental chemical reaction. The implementation of the basic reaction is not as simple as it seems. Actually, every person in the battery industry must understand the chemical reaction. From electrode behavior to specific gravity changes, chemistry drives performance. It is beneficial to know, as only then will one be able to comprehend what happens during charging and what occurs during discharging. A battery manufacturer can then determine the way in which the designed battery shall behave. The battery performance characteristics become clear by the variation in specific gravity and the manner in which the electrodes behave during charge and discharge. The hydrometer indicates the specific gravity. The electrode behavior can be noted by using a cadmium electrode. However, decoding these requires an understanding of the chemical reaction. It is then very easy to determine whether the ratio of active material components is appropriately balanced. Hence, a designer and manufacturer of battery must understand the chemical reaction to produce a good battery. This is the first fundamental principle or guideline on which I wanted to stress. The second thing is one must clearly define the process parameters and adhere to them. This is important because knowing what not to do is just as important as knowing what to do. We do not want the process parameters to be altered. The established methods must be followed in their entirety. When modifications are made, they need to be thoroughly validated and verified through a comprehensive review process at each stage and then incorporated into the process. Established methods that are effective should not be altered unless necessary. When people improvise on the shop floor, quality suffers. Change is fine, but it must be intentional and validated, not reactionary. It is crucial to ensure that all personnel expected to follow the defined process on the production line adhere to the laid down process parameters and do not deviate from them. Moving to the following guideline, another essential guideline is that one has to always think and plan a project, especially at the time of expansion, in a manner that the machine output is perfectly balanced. In the battery industry, there are both upstream and downstream production processes. This has to be planned properly because we do not want any excess inventory waiting for an undue long period for further processing at any stage of manufacture. Excess inventory eats into the profitability. Say, for example, we have grids being cast, and casting is not a problem area, but pasting is a big problem because we are not getting workers for pasting. We considered installing a pasting machine, but then sufficient grids were not available. We decided it didn't matter as we would paste once every 4 days. We chose to accumulate the grids and then paste them. That is perfectly okay. You can use a pasting machine and paste the grids of 4 days in a single day. There is a possibility that you may not have thought about where you are going to do the curing. You have to make a provision for curing all these plates which are of a 4-day grid casting. If curing chambers are not there and space for additional curing chambers is unavailable, then you have a mess up there. One more thing we need to consider is that when you cast 4 days grids and keep them, it means you are holding the 4-day inventory. Maybe it is worth doing it, or you may find that it is still okay. You realize that you are getting rid of the pasting problem, but do ensure that you have sufficient curing available, and later on after the curing, if you are going to form or charge the batteries after manufacturing, you need to check whether you have sufficient chargers to charge these batteries. Otherwise, you will have a lot of assembled batteries waiting for charging, and again more and more will come. You have grids waiting, assembled batteries waiting, but you're not having sufficient chargers, and you also have a curing problem. Floor space can be a constraint. Material handling becomes an issue. Therefore, it is always good to balance the machine output and plan projects properly. Next, we come to inventory control. We must understand the importance of inventory control. Any material in stock is idle money, and the interest payments for working capital are generally higher than the investment we usually make in plant and machinery. In battery manufacturing, working capital costs often outweigh fixed asset costs. Control your inventory and you control your business health. Lead is very costly, as are the other materials like lead oxide, red lead, separators, and containers. We may not realize it, but the profitability is determined by the materials in stock more than the investment in plant and machinery, which are comparatively lower. Any battery factory always has the working capital as a bigger borrowing, and a lot of money is borrowed for working capital rather than for plant and machinery. Hence, you have to understand the significance of inventory control and take care of this aspect. Now we come to the following guideline for success, and that is product quality. Quality is an absolute must and an understood requirement, but I'll still mention it. There is no alternative to a good quality product. At times, due to market pressures, competition, and customer demands, we may need to reduce our product prices. But at no time should we reduce cost by compromising on quality. You would have all heard of being penny wise and pound foolish, and this is precisely what happens when you compromise on quality. This leads to a potential increase in warranty claims and after sales service charges. This becomes a significant issue, and it also leads to a loss of reputation and business. Hence, we must never compromise on quality to reduce expenses. Let us go to the next point. One thing I have noticed is the neglect of employee training. This has to be done periodically. We must ensure that employees receive regular training to identify and correct any improper practices that they may have developed over time. We have already taught them, so they have learned something, but then over time they have also learned something wrong on their own. They incorporate it unnecessarily in the process. Some people forget what they have learned. Worse is they learn bad habits and try shortcuts. Regular training cycles help ensure employees stick to the process. Therefore, we need to help them unlearn the incorrect approach and relearn the correct method. Thus, learning, unlearning, and relearning are necessary. Sometimes it may be worth having an exam to identify and correct wrong behavior and ensure that they have learned the correct process to follow for their work. Another essential guideline involves saving and waste management. In the battery industry, because lead is very costly, every penny counts. So we have to reduce rework, eliminate non-value added work, avoid rejections, assign a value to the scrap generated during the process, and also prevent material pilferage. Scrap, rework, pilferage. These bleed your margins. We also have to strive to attain a state where there is no warranty or guarantee claim. The next point is that we must maintain a broad perspective on the business even if we prefer a micro view of operations. I am not saying that we need to neglect certain things, but having a macro view is very, very important because making significant strategic decisions becomes very, very crucial. We have to adopt a perspective that considers the future and avoid being focused solely on present benefits. The battery industry is not a very lucrative sector that generates quick profits. As the owner, one must take a broad perspective of the business and make quick strategic decisions based on changing situations. As I mentioned earlier, this is not a lucrative sector. You must be prepared as an owner or as an entrepreneur to stay invested for the long haul. Let me now move to a critical observation that I have made. I have observed that many people rely solely on turnover and often confuse it with profitability. This can result in substantial financial losses. It is essential to closely monitor cash flow and liquidity, understand the income and expenses, and review the profit and loss statement regularly. You have to ensure that you do not upset the apple cart. You have to therefore gain a comprehensive understanding of cash flow, liquidity, turnover, and profits, and realize that all these are different terms having different meanings. It is essential to have a proper costing system that relates to the cost of lead, considering that metal prices are not static. A dynamic costing system is a crucial requirement to ensure that batteries are not sold at a loss. Another crucial aspect of business, the 10th point that I would like to emphasize, is being fair to all parties, including employees, vendors, customers, stakeholders, and service providers, before considering oneself. Of course, this applies to all businesses, but I believe it merits a special attention for this specific lead acid battery industry. Only when all these people are taken care of does the business run successfully. You can get the best rates from the vendors, the best performance from your employees, and you can satisfy all your customers, stakeholders, and service providers. This is very, very important. Many industries have closed either because they have not taken care of their vendors or employees. And this situation is something that everybody in the battery industry must avoid. Companies don't close because of poor tech. They close because of poor relationships. In fact, 10 out of all the 11 points that I have mentioned till now in this episode are all very important. There is nothing less important than the other. The final guideline is philosophical. It is pretty different from the earlier guidelines. It is my advice that one must consider retiring when one no longer profits or derives satisfaction from one's work. Battery manufacturing is not a hobby. It's high effort, high responsibility work. Don't linger beyond your joy. It is advisable to start planning for retirement from this industry much before you retire. As and when you see your income not commensurate with your efforts or your enthusiasm for the work diminishing, it is time to plan for a retirement. Well, that's all for now in this podcast. I hope these guidelines will be helpful for all battery manufacturers. And thank you very much for tuning in to this episode of my podcast.
Please do visit www.rameshnatrajan.in. Keep yourself updated about our new releases by hitting the subscribe button.